Welcome back to our program. This is Bruce Engelman today, and we have a very, very honored special guest. I know I say we have a special guest often, but in this case, it's really true. Dr. Bob Gray, one of the great preachers in the history of America, is here with us today. And Dr. Gray, it is so great to have you all the way from Longview, Texas.
Well, thank you. It's good to be here.
God bless you, sir. God bless you, sir. I had the privilege of being on staff with Dr. Bob Gray at the Longview Baptist Temple and Texas Baptist College for 5.5 years.
Yes,
5.5 years, the greatest years of my life. Enjoyed every minute of it. Got to know your family. Scott and I are still like brothers. And Dr. Gray, tell us just a little bit about your ministry and about yourself. And I could go along with, the accolades and the resume for an hour, but just
well, I was
highlight-
saved. I was saved at age 11, and for 15 years I was in the American Baptist denomination.
Now, is that the American Baptist Convention or the Missionary Baptist one?
Missionary Baptist,
Okay.
American Baptist Association. There was the NABA and the BMA and a bunch of other, and ABA. So I did not know anything about Dr. Hiles, Dr. Rice, Dr. Robertson, Lester Roloff. I didn't know anything about them until I picked up a sword one day and read about Dr. Hiles and Dr. Rice. But the people that I knew said that it was a circus. They made fun of Brother Hiles, big crowds and so on. But I became curious. So we didn't see anybody saved in our church. Rarely we saw anybody saved. Church didn't grow. And so I went to a sword conference in South Bend, Indiana, Grace Baptist Church. Charles Davis was the pastor at that time. He later built the college for Dr. Bob Gray in Florida. So I went there and sat in the front row and heard Dr. Rice and Dr. Hiles, and I was absolutely enamored by it. I was 25 years of age. So I left the American Baptist and went to an independent Baptist church and surrendered to the ministry in that sword conference. And then I later went to Hiles Anderson College. I'd already been to Michigan State University, where I studied business and accounting, and I worked for General Motors for 7 years. And so during that period of time, I gradually became close to the knowledge of Dr. Hiles, Dr. Rice, and Lester Roloff, and so on. I listened to Lester Roloff on the radio all the time. He was quite a man of God.
Yes, he was. Yes,
Unique.
he was. I love the story. Maybe you could tell our viewers about you were sitting at the desk of General Motors as a cost accountant, and you had a penny to balance. Can you tell us that story and
Yes.
how it kind of God used that to bring you into the ministry?
Yeah, there's so many working days that you have to get your P&L statements done, and back in those days, a computer room was about as big as this room, not like now. And so I had so many days to balance the P&L statement so it could be sent to Detroit. And we were in Kalamazoo, Michigan at the time, Fisher Body Division. So I'm sitting there after having gone to the sword conference. My heart is burning. I brought my Bible to work. I'd never done that before. I'd never read my Bible through in 1 year until I went to Hiles Anderson. So it's kind of denominational work there. So I'm sitting there. I knew what I had to do. And I couldn't find a penny to save my life. And we worked and worked, and I worked and worked, couldn't find it. Paul Domke was my supervisor, cost accounting. So at my desk, I surrendered. I just said, this is it. I just can't do it. So I took a penny out of my pocket and taped it to the upper right-hand side of that P&L statement. And I took it into Paul, and I said, Paul, I'm giving you 30 days notice. I found the penny. It was kind of a joke, and I said, I found the penny, but I'm resigning. And he was shocked. He said, I just can't believe you're going to do this.
Well, you were moving up in the corporation.
Yeah, I was fixing to go to Detroit, the headquarters, at the time. There was an opening, and I was vetted for it, and I was supposed to go. But I had to make a decision, and I made a decision to go full-time ministry. And I'm glad I did. 44 years of ministry now.
Wow. Well, it's changed America, and you've helped so many people. You've led thousands to Christ, maybe tens of thousands. And the thing of it is, you flatly say, I know I was called because I didn't answer the phone for about 6 years. But you were never actually called. You and Dr. Rice were never. Talk about that a little bit.
No, it bothered me. It bothered me. Because at the sword conference, I dove in the altar and I just said, Lord, you can have my life, do anything you want to. And to be honest with you, I was scared that God was going to send me to Africa, some foreign land. But when I finally said, I didn't care. didn't care, whatever God wanted to do. But I called Dr. Rice. I did not know at that time that he was the 20th century's mightiest pen or internationally known. I didn't know that.
Yes.
I'm just a kid out of an American Baptist church. And so I picked the phone, called him at his home, of all things, and Dr. Rice answered. And I said, Dr. Rice, I was at the conference, and I began to tell about what it did for me. And I said, but I've got a problem. He said, what's that? And I said, I don't know what being called means. I want to give my life to Christ. I want to surrender, but I've not been called like I've heard others talk about. And that's what he said to me, son, I've never been called.
How about that?
I just volunteered. He said, God will stop you if God doesn't want you to. So I just surrendered my life to full-time service. I don't belittle men who say I've had a call, a certain call. I think that's wonderful. But for me, I don't know what that means to me.
Mm-hmm.
But I know that I just gave my life to full-time service, and God blessed it. That's all I can say.
Amen. Amen. Dr. Rice, I believe he was teaching English at the University of Chicago and was winning souls at the Pacific Garden Rescue Mission on weekends. And he said, boy, this is a whole lot more fun and much more important than teaching English to a bunch of college students. And he just surrendered too. So,
Right.
And of course, those of us who have been called, we use the Damascus call or Paul's call on the road to Damascus as kind of a prototype. But again, I know I was, because I didn't answer the phone. I was in broadcasting, as you well know, and also rising up in that profession. And I did not want to be a preacher, but God's phone kept ringing. I didn't actually hear a phone, by the way, viewer, but through that still small voice and circumstances.
Sure.
I would say that you and Dr. Rice are kind of the exception. Most of the preachers I've known,
Right.
or preacher boys, say they have been called.
Right, right. My two sons, definite calls to the ministry, no question about it. Both very successful
Oh, yeah.
men of God in their own right. And so there's no doubt. My son-in-law, Tim Forgy, married to my redheaded daughter,
Yeah.
Karen, definite call. Mark, who's married to Kimberly, our oldest child, is a deacon in the church, but not a call to the ministry. But I know, I've heard my sons give their testimonies and others, and I absolutely, now Dr. Hiles and I traveled together for 22 years. During the latter part of his ministry, when we were together, he told me one day in the car, he said, Brother Gray, I think you were called. I don't think that you quite wanted to accept it.
Oh.
And so he was very kind to me. He was my mentor. He was your pastor, my pastor.
Yes, yes.
And but anyway, I'm not sure that I know. Here I am at 71 years of age. I have given my life to full-time service. It's been blessed, and so I'm enjoying every bit of it.
I cannot believe you're 71. You look great for your age.
Oh,
Man, that's wow.
You look good for 90.
Well, thank you. I use what do I use? Jaffra. Yeah, and remember that soul winner we used to have at Longview Baptist Temple, James Tester?
Oh yes.
This homely woman would invariably come to the, no offense, ladies, come to the door and we'd be out soul winning together. Great soul winner. He's right up there with UNCW Fisk. And they would come to the door and he's this, very homely 85-year-old lady. Oh, you're so beautiful. What do you use, Noxzema? And they would laugh. And before you know it, Jim would be in the house winning them to Christ. And, but you mentioned your children. I claim no success with kids because my kids are just now getting married. And I still have one who's on full-time staff for Dr. Chappell, who's not married. But my 3 kids are serving the Lord and winning souls. And again, they're not perfect. And you would be the first to admit that Bob and Scott and Karen and Kimberly are not perfect. But all 4 of them are serving the Lord.
Right.
Most preachers I know, their kids are not only not in the ministry, they don't even go to church. Half of them are atheists.
Right.
Don't even believe in God.
Right.
What would you say to parents?
I'll tell you, kids hate phonies. Back in my time, back in the 60s, Abraham Lincoln was president. But
1860.
they would they'd use the word plastic. Teenagers, when they'd say a phony. So that guy's plastic.
Yeah.
And I really believe the key to it is being the same in the pulpit and out of the pulpit. I joke a lot and probably cut up too much. But our family was that way. And as you know.
Oh, Scott and I, yeah.
And so we raised those kids with an atmosphere of what we were at church is what we were at home. We weren't putting on a show. This was real to us. It was our life. And it wasn't enduring it, it was enjoying it. And one time somebody said, Dr. Gray, what do you and your kids do for fun? I said, we made fun of people. And we had a...
I remember you said that at the solar
Yeah,
clinic one year, yeah.
And our kids, we just laugh and cut up.
And that's what Scott and I do when we're
Sure,
together.
sure.
We laugh until we cry. You
Remember
know?
with Dr. Hiles' funeral? We chartered a flight out of Dallas here.
You took me with you. Yes.
And but on that flight, those kids, I remember the stewardess, Kimberly was telling me this, stewardess said, where are you all going? We're going to a funeral. And the plane, they had the plane in stitches.
We had the pilot cracking jokes. Remember that? That was before 9/11.
Crying, so they were just weeping, not weeping but tears, but of joy. It was like jokes and so on. And the stewardess said, I can't believe y'all are going to a funeral. But that's just the kind of atmosphere that we created, and I'm glad we did.
Yes.
They saw the joy side, they saw the bad side, but they saw the fun side of the ministry.
I'll never forget on that flight. I just have to tell one quick story, one anecdote. Scott and I were passing notes to the pilot via the stewardess. And Dr. Larry May, a good mutual friend, anytime he's in the area, I go to hear him preach. Dr. Larry May, who used to pastor on this side of Dallas, smiles about one Thursday every 6 months. That's just the way he is. He's kind of stoic. Great guy. Wonderful preacher. Great pastor. Pastoring again in Central Texas. But anyway, we passed a message, Scott and I, your son, to the pilot. And he said something about Larry May, and we turned around, and Dr. May was actually smiling. He had to laugh himself in his two teeth, and Scott and I lost it. The thing that impressed me about you when I was on your staff, Dr. Gray, was your balance. Now, balance is a very misunderstood word. We hear a lot of the people in the homeschooling movement, good people, but balance is a bad word. No, if you're totally sold out to Christ, and you're a radical for Jesus, then a little balance wouldn't hurt. You play golf, you took your family on vacations, your kids love to be with you. Talk a little bit about that.
Well, I made a point to take a 2-week vacation every year. My wife she would say, you're taking 2 white shirts, that's all you're taking, because she didn't want me preaching, she just wanted us to be together, which we did. So we would just cut up, have a good time, and but it's the kind of there is no differentiating between the pulpit Bob Gray and the parent Bob Gray. And so I think that has a lot to do with it. As they got older, of course, there was a transition in treatment. You don't treat a 16-year-old like you do a 6-year-old.
Exactly.
And so you grow with them as they grow. And your avenue of influence changes, but it's still there. So I think being real, I think is a real key to it. We cut up a lot. And I learned this from B.R. Lincoln. B.R. Lincoln told me one time, we were having lunch, and he said, you need to put a little orange juice in that casserole. And B.R. Lincoln used humor. Brother Hiles used humor.
Yes, he did.
And
Curtis
Hudson used humor. So I adapted that, not just in the pulpiteering aspect, but the parenting aspect. So when a child needed to be disciplined, I want to make sure they understood why. I want to make sure they understood this is because I wanted them to love God, and I'm doing this instead of God getting a hold of you, I'm getting a hold of you. So there was always an understanding of those. So I think pulpiteering and parenting, if you're real, you can help a lot. My book on parenting skills, I would recommend that book because we waited till our children were grown before we penned the book. Folks can go to solvechurchproblems.com and go to the store if you'd like to and order those books. I've written 34 books.
34 books, and Dr. Gray has written 2 bios on my pastor and preacher of 38 years. The great Dr. Jack Hiles, pastor of the world's largest church for 3 decades, world's largest Sunday school, America's largest Baptist church. Just a great pulpiteer, great soul winner, great Sunday school builder. This one's called The Communicator. I think this is the newest one that's out. And then this is When Principle Was King, about Brother Hiles. There's a picture of him when he pastored over here in Dallas, or maybe when he first went to Hammond, and the Lord used to build the world's largest Sunday school. And then Trial by Fire, Satan's Attack. And I want to get to this in just a second. Satan's Attack on Independent Baptists. But I do want to ask you one more question, Dr. Gray, about the family, because so many families are hurting out there, and so many Christian marriages are splitting up. We're losing our teenagers. There was a time, and this brings a tear to my eye because I am close to your family, especially Scott, but all your family, where you had to make a decision between the ministry
Right.
and your kids, and it was when Bob was going through a
Right.
rough time.
Right.
Do you feel at liberty to share a little
Sure.
bit about that?
When we went to Texas, of course, it was tough on the kids because they had friends. So we left friends, they left friends, and so we went to Texas. When we got there, I honestly was concerned about my oldest daughter. I didn't think that she was going to adapt quickly to the change, and I thought it was going to hurt her. So I was really worried about her, to be honest with you. But then Bobby was the one that started to waver. We had an open school, a lot of kids. The church didn't have the standards that I had. They didn't have the soul winning fire that I wanted to be a part of that ministry. And Bobby began to waver a little bit. And so one day I called him in the office. I put a box on my desk, and I said, "Son, help me pack these books." And he was packing for it. It dawned on him. He said, "Dad, what are you doing?" And I said, "I'm resigning." So I've written my resignation out. I'm not going to lose you for any church. Now, I don't mean I'm going to quit church or anything like that. But I said, as far as pastoring is concerned, if this is going to hurt you and you're not going to be able to be what you ought to be for God, then my resignation is written. I'm going to read it next Sunday. And he broke down and started crying. And he hugged me and he said, he was a teenager. He said, "Daddy, don't. Please don't." And so we knelt, had prayer in the office. And it was a turning point in his life.
And now he's the pastor of that
Now
great
he's
church.
the pastor of that great church, yeah.
That's
Yeah.
an amazing story. And I think that's another reason your kids follow you. Not only are you the same in church as you are at home, when it came time to decide between the ministry
Yeah.
and your children and family, you chose your children and family,
Absolutely.
and God gave you both.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And I retired 7 years ago because of my wife's illness. She's had
Yes.
42 surgeries.
42 surgeries.
Yeah, it's terrible. Just a deteriorating bone disease. And she had a heart attack 10 weeks ago.
I'm so sorry.
80% damage to her heart. But I retired because of her illness. She was homebound, and I felt like she should be taken care of. I'll tell you, it's interesting. When I went to First Baptist Church to attend Hiles-Anderson College, I asked that my whole family be put on the same bus route. So the philosophy that I had before I went to Bible college is a philosophy I've carried throughout my life.
Wonderful. Wonderful.
We're going to all be a part of it.
Yeah, be part of the
So we
ministry.
did. We
It's-
did. And I think that made a difference.
I'm sure it did. That's a great concept. I bet very few bus captains have thought about that. We're almost out of time. Boy, this has been a fast half hour. And next time you're in town, we'll do an hour. But this book, Trial by Fire, Satan's Attack on
That's my
Independent
favorite.
Baptists.
That's my favorite.
This is your favorite,
That's my favorite.
book and favorite read. I look across America. Most of the leaders of Christianity were independent Baptists of one stripe or another, or they were very close to it.
Right.
A young Billy Graham in the 40s and early
Yeah.
50s.
Yes, sir.
And Dr. Falwell in the 60s, and Brother Hiles, of course, and Jack Hudson and Curtis Hudson, and you mentioned B.R. Lakin and Dr. Bob, the first and the second. And they're vanishing off the scene. Lester Roloff, they're Tom Malone, they're leaving us. And you and just a handful of others are the last left from that generation. What has happened in
Well,
3 minutes? What has happened to our
Okay, here's
movement?
what's happened. History repeats itself. So all we're doing is going through a repetition of history. When D.L. Moody passed, Charles Spurgeon passed, there was a lull period. Then God raised up J. Frank Norris. When J. Frank Norris passed, there was a lull period. Then God raised up Jack Hiles and John Rice and Lee Robertson and Lester Roloff. They were all compadres.
Mhm.
So I think now that they have passed, we're in a lull period. But here's what I believe. Out there somewhere is a Jack Hiles. Probably listen to this broadcast.
Mhm.
Out there's a Lester Roloff, a Curtis Hudson, a Jack Hudson. There's somebody out there right now that God is working on. God has never left a nation without a man of God. Never. Never. And he's not going to leave this nation without a man of God. So I honestly believe it's a lull period. Like 400 years between the Old Testament and the New Testament.
Yes,
I'm not
sir.
saying 400 years, but I'm saying in history,
Yes,
if you
sir.
study history,
Yes, sir.
you see the repetition of that. So I think we're just in a lull period. I'm excited. I'm excited about, we have ibaptistcollege.org where we can train young men, where they can be under your tutorship in your church, but receive the academics while you help them with the spiritual aspect.
Sounds great.
So these are all experienced. Tom Wallace, 60 years in the ministry, teaches for us.
He's preached here for us, yes.
Yeah,
yes.
great
Great man,
men. Dr.
yeah.
Les Hobbins and so on. There's one chapter, if I may.
Yeah,
May I?
absolutely.
Okay.
And then I have one last question for you, and then we're out of time.
Okay, there's the one chapter in here that I think is worth the book, and it's on this matter of harmony, Satan's attack on our harmony. And that's chapter 2 in this book, Trial by Fire. Because I think there's a misunderstanding about this matter of unity versus harmony. In my neighborhood, I cannot unite with the Church of Christ guy down the street or the Jehovah's Witnesses, but I can have harmony about safety for the neighborhood. So that whole chapter deals with that. Everybody says, why can't we get along? We can't get along because we weren't meant to get along. Every independent Baptist pastor is God called or volunteered. He's in the service. He's serving those people there. Well, God has that man and his convictions and so on for those people for a reason. So we are not to unite, but we're to be in harmony. It's a great chapter.
Sounds
And I think
fantastic. I can't
chapter
wait to
that-
read it.
Is
Is this my copy for Christmas?
Yes, it's yours. Yes, it's yours.
You know, it's kind of like the Republican senators and congressmen, conservatives, trying to get along with a liberal president. It just doesn't work.
Oh, no. It's proved. The last 8 years have proved it. It is not a matter of compromise. It's a matter of cooperating. So a lot of people are saying there needs to be compromise. No, you cooperate on right. You never cooperate on wrong. And the strength of the presidency, the strength of the Congress, the strength of these men is depending upon their definition of right. Constitutional issues ought to be right issues, not rewriting the Constitution, not rewriting the Bible, but simply taking the Constitution and enforcing it. It's a wonderful document. It's a God-given
It
document.
is God-given, yes.
And the King James Bible for the English-speaking people. We don't
Yes.
need to rewrite it.
No.
We need to just establish the right boundaries and the rights of that word and preach it and teach it.
You've taken a strong stand on the King James Bible. You've taken a strong stand on the local church. And this is a perfect segue because you brought up the presidency the last 8 years. You took a little bit of heat as a leader of American Christianity for
Yes.
coming out for Donald Trump. Now everybody, not everybody, there's some never Trumpers, but 90% of the clergy are going, yeah, we were for him when they were really for somebody else. Now that your man has taken the White House, do you feel vindicated?
Vindicated, that's a good word. I feel like Ezra, a little space grace. I believe that God has given us a little grace, a little foot off the pedal. And I think that God is saying, okay, men of God, step up to the plate for right. Get back to aggressive soul winning. Get back to, forget political correctness. It's ruined our pulpits.
Yes, it
We're
has.
scared to death
Yeah.
to call sin by its name. So I do think that God has given us an opportunity. I think it's an answer to prayer. Forgive me for saying this. But when he was nominated, I wrote in my Bible, and I can show it to you, Dear God, please perform a miracle and put Donald Trump in. And so I'm to blame. So if everybody, you're blaming me, you can blame me. But I do believe that, I don't think as much vindication as it is verification. I think that God is saying, churches, you've got an opportunity now, because he's going to stand for the First Amendment, Second Amendment, and right on. He's going to take a strong stand for it. If he doesn't, he'll pay. But with the Congress, the Senate, the White House, see, I caught heat because I said this. It's not who's in the White House, it's who's in God's house that makes a difference. So when these primaries were going on, I would not take a stand for anybody because I felt like we had to wait till we nominated the person. So the Cruz supporters got upset with me. The Trump supporters got upset with me because I was waiting for the primary. When the primary was through and it became very clear to me, Donald Trump's the man. And so he is, we did not vote in a pastor, we did not vote in a Sunday school teacher, but somebody who's going to keep their word. That's the main thing. So if he will do that, if he'll keep his word, if the Congress and Senate, if they'll back him, keep his word, you're going to see some tremendous things happen, not just financially for our nation, but spiritually.
Amen. The book is Trial by Fire, How Satan's Attack on Independent Baptists Has Sadly Affected America in an Adverse Way. But he has the solutions in here too. Again, When Principle Was King, Dr. Jack Hyles, and his latest book about Dr. Jack Hyles, pastor of America's largest church for about 40 years, is called The Communicator. Sadly, we are out of time. Dr. Gray, it's
Well,
been
enjoyed
wonderful.
it.
Would you come back on sometime?
I promise you I will.
Great.
God bless.
God
Thank you,
bless
sir. Thank you.
This has been Bruce Engelman with Dr. Bob Gray, evangelist, former pastor of the great Longview Baptist Temple, and a leader in American Christianity. Until next time, stay faithful to the Lord. He's coming back real soon.